Good morning. I have places to go and be this morning, so I do not have bedhead, but you know. Let's read some together. Like the rest of this series, we are reading through the book Redeeming Heartache, and this is a fantastic book so far. We are starting on page 19, the section Entering Trauma. We're finishing chapter 1 today. Current suffering cannot be engaged until we let our bodies accept heartache. It is perhaps one of the most important things to face about our refusal to prepare for disaster. We don't want to feel what our bodies suffer in trauma. When we feel suffering in our bodies, we can't help but connect the present to the past. We remember the day before the tragedy ensued. We were happy once, even if we aren't in this moment. I remember a party the night before the first COVID-19 death occurred in Seattle. It was our daughter's 40th birthday celebration and our son's 32nd. We danced with their friends for hours in a tight space and shared laughter and conversation inches from one another's faces, all while possibly passing to one another a virus that could kill. I remember that night and I weep. Isolation and the loss of connection are consequences of any trauma. The memory of that night is fragmented and haunting. Will we ever have another night like that with all of us alive and free from the fear of what close quarters may mean? I don't know. But my body responds with increased cortisol and tears. To enter trauma is to allow the intensification of loss to seize our hearts and bodies. The result of a single traumatic moment is heightened sensitivity for at least 4 to 6 hours. You got that? The result of a single traumatic moment is heightened sensitivity for at least 4 to 6 hours. Cortisol pulses, and the biochemicals related to intimacy, serotonin, and oxytocin are the names of those, they decrease. The moment we feel unsafe in any context, we experience the typical options of fight, flight, or freeze. And some would add, this is just an aside to the book, fawning. We can talk more about that another time. This chain, fight, flight, or freeze, is hardwired into our brain and operates in babies and small children well before language develops or threats can be assessed and managed. God has divinely equipped us to meet a threat with the best our bodies can muster. Our natural physical responses to inner traumas help us regulate and return to stasis. Imagine turning a corner and encountering a threat to your life. In an instant, a series of neurological processes will occur to aid your survival. The cognitive center in the left frontal lobe shuts down because you don't need to philosophize about death. You need to take action to escape. Anything that might get in the way of survival is ignored in that moment. The result is that you probably lose your appetite, sexual desire, and the ability to process your emotions. You get so tunnel visioned that everything and everyone not related to survival gets put to the side and you lose the trees for the forest. During that time, you are more prone to overreact, make poor decisions, and fail to ask for help. Instead of reflecting on all your options, you instinctively make a decision that saves you from harm and helps you return to normal again, or at least as normal as possible. When we experience trauma and find no physical relief or bodily means to resolve the threat, fighting back or running away primarily, we remain in a hyperactive mode. Excuse me, please. When a situation feels too dangerous, we're intent on escaping, even if where we end up is more uncertain than where we began. If significant debris builds up to cause physical illness and psychological symptoms such as depression and anxiety, then the weight of that affects our relationships. When our reactive and defensive systems take over our ability to relate, the drama of trauma can effectively silence us, blind us to others, and drown out God's voice. Here's what's vital to understand before we begin. 1. If not properly expressed and resolved, trauma more than anything else will shape our identity and our actions. To understand what drives us, we must have access to the moments of shattering that set into motion both our core paradigm for how we see life and our core determination regarding how we will live it. Unresolved pain shapes our deepest fears and passions, and our fears and passions most deeply shape who we are and what we will become. Current trauma unearths past trauma. This is number 2. Our earliest traumas, many of which we consider normal and inconsequential, determine our response to current traumas that often seem far greater because of our heart's familiarity with the feeling. 3. Until a bridge is constructed between the past and the present, we are bound to repeat the past without recognizing the real war we are fighting. We end up fighting or flighting from an enemy that's real, like COVID-19 or rejection from friends. But we fail to see that we are also reacting to wounds that are as much a threat to our thriving as anything in the present. 4, building the bridge requires us to step away from the debris caused by current trauma to see our efforts to construct a safe space for ourselves, a false Eden. To enter past suffering when we're fighting for survival will seem like a fool's errand. It's hard enough to address the present. Facing the past seems impossible. But our learned coping mechanisms won't allow us the freedom to fully live, let alone process a trauma as great as a pandemic and all its costs. No, if we want to grow and live and help ourselves and others, including our children, we must proceed into the future unencumbered. In the pages ahead, this is Dan speaking, Kathy and I will introduce you to what all of us experience east of Eden as we seek protection from the shattering. The biblical categories we'll unpack, orphan, stranger, and widow, illuminate the ways evil uses abuse and trauma to keep our wounds hidden. As a result, we struggle to know who we are and whether we will be known and loved. Unresolved or unexpressed experiences of betrayal, powerlessness, and ambivalence rob us of shalom and complicate our desire for care, our longing for connection, and our search for meaning. The good news is that we need not stay in bondage to our wounds because we are also called to become priests, prophets, and kings or queens by restoring faith, hope, and love. If we learn to listen well to our stories, we can begin to heal, and the process will reveal more of God and awaken others to what it means to be fully alive. By learning to bless the heartache of the past, working to build goodness in the present, and committing to imagining our restoration in the future, countless brave ones have found that the arduous journey not only is possible, but it is the only path to real life. In part 2, we will look at how the orphan, stranger, and widow wounds can be redeemed by their corresponding kingdom roles, and how our past suffering can become the birthplace of healing and our deeper call. But to enter that glorious place, we must first recognize how these wounds cause us to construct false Eden, to artificially escape, dealing with the painful world outside our original home. Drop me a comment telling me where you're watching from and how this hits you. What do you feel when you are listening to these words or reading along if you have your own book? I'd love to know what you think.